Hi, today I have a completely different setup. I mean, it's not completely different. I keep saying this. It's not completely different, but it has some added objects. I am exploring with this new format of this video for a couple reasons. So you may notice that I have a desk and I have a sketchbook, I have some paints, I have some what is the name of this? Brushes, because I am going to paint as I talk in this video. There's a couple reasons why I wanted to do this. The first one is because I've been finding myself on the computer so much that my creative juices in my hands really were asking for something to do. And I've always been a hands-on type of person. If you're new here, if you haven't really known me until just now with this channel, for the last 8 years, I had a company and it was a stationery company and I would make products and mainly wedding invitations, and everything was really hands-on, really detailed oriented. And I love that part of the company. So creativity and creating with my hands is just part of who I am. And as I am transitioning into whatever life is showing me and really creating this videos, which is really the main thing that I'm doing right now, just as a way of putting myself out there, sharing my voice, sharing my perspective on the world and life in general. I found myself just being on a computer and just doing digital stuff and editing, and I was feeling like something was really missing. And I had been doing some of like the creative things and hands-on things on the side, but I really was not finding the time or making the time mainly to really do that, because my mornings and like my classes, yoga and Pilates and things like that are really something that I prioritize. And usually by the time I come home and like the day goes on, then I have to sit down and then I'm editing, or I'm like recording and then editing, and all of the things that the digital world require, that I didn't find the time, or again, I was not making the time for this. So as a way to integrate all of my worlds, this is coming into this format, this video, and I'm going to try to finish painting just something so like I have a picture that I found on Pinterest and I liked. I don't know, I have a third camera here. You may notice it, or you may see it here. So I may even be able to insert some of like the angles from what I'm doing. We'll see how that goes. But I've been playing with this, just recreating this image. I don't know if you can see it. Honestly, I don't know if that is focusing or not. Hopefully it is. So this is what I'm doing. And I'm missing kind of like the bottom area, which is something that I was kind of like not excited about. I'm using acrylics. Painting is really something that I hadn't really explored with. I've always been more of like working with paper and shapes and cutting, and not so much like a 2D type of media, but I also like it. And every time I see it, I'm like, oh, I want to do that. I actually want to take an oil painting class, because I think I would benefit from learning some of like the techniques and not just like throwing myself in the pool and like learning how to swim, which I usually do that with everything. I'm using acrylics, and I noticed that I want to use like layers of paint, which I know that is something that you can do with oil painting, but I've never really painted anything in oil or with oils. Maybe I did when I was like 5 years old, something like that. Anyways, all this long story to tell you that I'm going to be trying to paint as I talk today. And another reason why I thought it was an interesting experiment is because, I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm like driving or I am doing something that doesn't require my full attention, like I mean, of course, driving requires my full attention, but what I'm saying is that I'm still able to speak as I am driving, or as I am like washing the dishes, or painting, I'm able to speak. And there's something about my attention being on another object or like a subject, like again, like the example of driving, that allows me to speak a little bit more unfiltered. It's not like I lose complete connection with what I'm saying, but there's something about me not putting a lot of filters, of course, not allowing that to go to an extreme where I am talking unconsciously or like not being aware of what I'm saying, which actually ties really well with what I want to talk about today. So before I just keep talking and don't do anything, I'm going to start using or putting my paints in my palette. Let's see. I don't know if this is going to be a little too much for my attention and for my multitasking. Hopefully I can handle it. So I'm going to paint this little couch here, and I'm going to need white, a little bit of yellow. So what I want to talk about today is something that has been a huge part of my personal development, my spiritual development. I would go as far as saying that the concepts and the practice of what I'm going to talk about today have been really the catalysts for my own creation of how I see the world. And what I'm talking about is I'm using two concepts. As you may already know, I usually draw from different traditions, and a lot of the practices that I have implemented in my life, I have learned from traditions that resonate with me. And today I'm going to be talking about right speech from the Buddhist perspective. And I'm also going to be talking about the concept of being impeccable with our word from the Toltec tradition as it is shared by Don Miguel Ruiz, specifically from the book, The Four Agreements. So I will start by sharing what I think and why I think it's important, why I think right speech and being impeccable with our word is really, really important. So as I was growing up, one of the things that I would always hear, like my nuclear circle say, I just don't want to throw it all on one person, but it was mainly coming from one person. I would always hear them say that I was very rude, or that I was unfiltered, that I didn't know how to say things, that I was very hurtful with the way that I spoke. And a lot of that I believe was true, because there was a lot of things that I wanted to say that were somewhat repressed by the outside world, that my only way to communicate was through anger and through a lot of resentment. And in a way like that, that thing that they used to tell me that I was rebellious or whatnot, it was true, because that was what I was trying to do as a defense in a way, or as a way for me to kind of like break that barrier that had been placed on me to really express myself. And I was recently talking to Xenia in a podcast. I think the name of that one is, it's about creativity. I think it's, I'm going to try to insert the link here in the video, because I'm not remembering exactly the name of that episode. But I was telling her that as an adult now, I realized that I believe the reason why I wanted to rebel so much, and why I really wanted to speak my truth, which of course this is something that we all kind of like innately want to do. But really the reason why I think for me it was so present is because I knew or noticed that there were a lot of things that were approached around me that were not right. They didn't feel right for me. And because I didn't have the language or even the safety to kind of like share that around me. And mind you, I grew up in a very loving family. It's just, as we grow up, our parents are also growing up, and we don't really have the tools. Just now in 2024, we're kind of learning about how the way that we are cared for when we are children really affects the way that we start perceiving the world. So a simple situation of you crying because your ice cream fell could be a very important situation or experience for the rest of your life and how you understand the world, until you become an adult and you kind of like start exploring that and you realize, well, maybe this is not what this meant, which I talked about in the last video of You Have Choices. I do remember that one, the name of that one. So I think that, that I really wanted to express myself because there were things that in my heart didn't feel loving. They didn't feel caring. They didn't feel right. And, that expression, not feeling right, is something that I kind of stay away from using as an adult now. It just didn't feel wholesome, right? I think that is a better way to express that. A simple thing of like, I don't know, just like not wanting something to eat and then being yelled at. I think most of us have experienced that as children. And then if we think about it, like we are children and maybe there's some type of discomfort that we are trying to express. And then instead we're receiving, anger comments or, kind of like a direction of like, you have to eat. And we are in a way disrespecting what our body is signaling. That doesn't feel right. And then I think I had the capacity back then to understand that and to notice that I was not being true to myself. And it was those little things that I think accumulated. And with time, I just decided that I just was going to go to the extreme and kind of like talk exactly how I felt. But really, it wasn't exactly how I felt of everything that I had accumulated, which was a lot of anger and a lot of resentment. So yes, I was speaking the truth back then, but those were kind of like walls that I built around my heart and how pure things really felt and the truth of the way that I wanted to communicate. So my anger came from my need to communicate from a place of love and compassion. So that is kind of like where I'm going with why I think the way that we express, the way that we communicate is so important. So as an adult, this is not going very well, by the way. I'm talking and I'm not doing much. As an adult, I recognized, so I came to the United States when I was 16 years old. And I started to live by myself. I mean, I lived with an aunt for a few months. And then my brother came here and lived with me for a couple years. But he's almost my age. He's a few months, like 18 months older than me. I don't know why I keep saying that, 2 years older than me. But I had the opportunity to start to see the world from a place where my nuclear family was not telling me what to do and how to do it and the way that I should do it and all of that. So it was kind of like an opportunity for me to see the world from a lens that I wanted to, like the lens that I chose, basically. Of course, I still had the culture and everything around me, but everything was new because I moved here when I graduated high school, so I came here to go to university, and I was lucky to go to a school where there were a lot of different cultures and different people from different countries and, different traditions and whatnot. So it was all new, but it was a newness that had a lot of diversity. So that was an extremely beautiful gift for me to see all of the options that I had, basically. And as I grew up, so I had 2 romantic relationships that I think really were very important in the way that I understood myself and what I didn't want for myself. What I didn't want for the world, really, because what I don't want for myself, I don't want for the world. Those relationships really showed me how I didn't want to be, how I didn't want to express myself, especially the last relationship before I met my now husband, which I absolutely love, and he's the best thing ever. That relationship really taught me communication, what I didn't want in my communication style, basically. It was such a huge lesson on this is not what I want. This is not what I want for myself, like as a receiver. And also, mainly, I don't want this to be propagated, right? Like I don't want this to come out of my mouth the way that I connect with people, especially people that I love. So, right speech. So right speech from Buddhism came to me from a book. I remember like the first time I read this book, I don't remember the name of the book, but this was years ago, even before I started to become interested in mindfulness or, any of this contemplative traditions or just spiritual traditions. I think my husband, I was already married, and I think my husband brought this book from his boss. I think he sent it to me. I honestly, like my memory is not great, and I must have been already interested in some of these topics for him to like know that I would be interested in reading that book. I don't know. So I think his boss sent me this book, and I was learning about, the basic Buddhist teachings. And right speech, and just to give you a little context, if you don't know anything about Buddhism, I think the first video that I shared on YouTube, I'm forgetting the name of that one too. I talked about the main umbrella teaching from Buddhism, which is the 4 Noble Truths. And then from the fourth and final step of the 4 Noble Truths is the path towards enlightenment or liberation. And that path is the Eightfold Path. And in the Eightfold Path, we find right speech. So we find right speech along right view, right mindfulness, right action, and there's 8 of them. So right speech, and I wrote a couple notes here for me to remember, because I figured, I'm gonna be doing a few things. Like I think I need extra help. And like I said, this is not going very well. I'm not really multitasking properly. Black, I need black. So, I may need to edit this because I lost my train of thought. So right speech. So all of the teachings that are in the Eightfold Path, they outline mental and ethical guidelines, right? Like there's something I love about Buddhism, and is that the teachings never feel like rules. To me, they feel more like guideposts to kind of like check on myself and see like, oh, am I going in a path that feels wholesome, that feels away from harm, both for myself and others. So right speech talks about different key points of engaging in mindful communication, mindful speech, mindful use of our words. And those key points are abstaining from lying, which of course I think most of our biggest kind of like traditions and religions speak to this. And I think it is something that most of us don't have to really hear from an outside source, but to know this, to know that that is not correct or not wholesome. But I think all of us need the reminder. There's something about not lying from Buddhism and things that I've learned when I have attended different, settings or sanghas, as they're called, which sanghas are, communities that are gather with the intention to grow and cultivate their spiritual journey. And what I've learned is that lying extends to more areas of the way of our communication styles. One that was very impactful for me was not exaggerating. So in my family, exaggerating is kind of like our style of communication. So like I dropped a glass and I would say like, oh my God, I almost destroyed the whole kitchen, right? Like that is kind of like the way that we communicate. And when I learned that exaggerating with our speech was a way of lying, I was like blown away because it just made so much sense. Like, of course, I'm changing reality completely as I'm exaggerating what happened. So lying, of course, is huge because it is a way to harm that does not look as harmful or feel as harmful because it's not physical, but it's the way in which we connect with people and that we trust people. I recently, and I'm still going through it, and I'm doubting whether I should share this because it still hurts me. I've been going through something with a person that I trusted and they lied to me. It's not like a personal thing. It was kind of like a business situation. And it was just like, I'm still speechless because that person lied to me. And they really used their words to deceive me, right? And the feeling that arises from experiencing that is really, really hurtful. And we can see that everywhere in our culture right now. The way that I'm not going to get into politics, but I think we are all aware of that right now. But the way in which, politics are handled are in some way based on lying and deceiving, which is so telling of the way our world has been founded, right? Like the foundation of the structure of our reality, which is why it's so important to me to talk about this type of things, because I think we have gone so far. And in my heart, I know we can build a society that has a different foundation, a foundation that is based on love and compassion and connection and authentic connection. So, lying, of course, huge one. Not deceiving leads to mistrust and harm in so many ways. I think this one is very self-explanatory. Like, I don't think I have to go any deeper into this one. But of course, this is a great reminder always, like I said, exaggerating. I'm totally changing the way that reality is. It's a way of lying. Or, just white lies, as we call them. I try my best to stay away from that. The other day, I called a restaurant. We were late for a reservation, and we were not on the highway yet. And I told the person that there was traffic in the highway and that we were stuck in the highway. And like, this is how much I try to practice this. But I was so angry after I said that, at the fact that I just couldn't say like, oh, I'm about to get in the highway. I don't know. It's just like simple things like that. I think the more we keep ourselves accountable for this type of guidelines, the more we are going to become aware when there's like an actual big situation in which we we have to use our courage to tell the truth, then the muscle of that authenticity is going to be trained, is going to be strong. So we're going to find it within us to actually say what we mean the most real way possible. So another aspect of right speech is abstaining from divisive speech, which of course goes hand in hand with, not lying. And I mean, all of them, all of these teachings, of course, intersect and overlap. Oh my goodness, this is not a good thing. My painting anyways, it's happened multiple times before as I've been painting, but it's not good. It's too dark. So the divisive speech, right? So again, like I said before, this is something that we are constantly experiencing in the way that our world works right now. Social media is a place in which somehow it has given us this fake idea or feeling that we can just go into another person's house, because that's how I consider, the account of someone is kind of like entering their house. And yes, while we are putting ourselves out there and we are kind of like opening the door, it's still my house, right? It still should be in some way, not some way, in many ways, in all of the ways respected. But somehow we just feel like we can say whatever, being hurtful with another person, because obviously we don't have the accountability of having someone looking at us in the eye, and we are not putting ourselves fully out there. So the fake feeling of being able to just say whatever without having any consequences is definitely something that does not go along the lines or teachings from the Buddha. One of the reasons of existence of these teachings, and one of the intentions and the purpose of right speech, and of course the Eightfold Path, is not only to achieve enlightenment or liberation from what? From suffering, but goes along the way to reduce karma, which karma is basically the lessons. The way that I understand it, the way that I would like to explain is not like, karma is a bitch. We kind of understand karma like that way. I feel and understand karma from a place of like just simply the lessons that I haven't learned. So if I haven't learned the lesson that lying or, cursing someone or being rude to someone, being harmful to someone with my words, well, I haven't learned that compassionate speech, compassionate speech is actually the way towards connection, the way towards love. So in the way that I understand life in general, it's like I am incarnated in this human body because I am learning to love unconditionally, because I'm learning to go back to the source of creation, which is everything, and it holds, the truth of everyone and everything that exists. So it's going back to unity in a way. And the only way to go back to unity is understanding that the person next to me, the animal next to me, the insect, everything around me has been created by the same life force, the same cosmic intelligence. So my lessons are all going to be held by that truth. This is how I see the world, right? This is how I understand life. So when I haven't learned that harmful speech is not conduit towards this unity, or this going back to this one thing, then I need to learn it. And then there's going to be another lifetime in which I'm going to have to learn it, or not even a lifetime, but maybe tomorrow I'm going to be confronted with something or someone that is going to teach me that. Because maybe as the perpetrator of that, right? Like as the source that is putting that out, I'm not able to understand it, but maybe when I receive that, I'm able to understand it. And that is, I think, where this idea of karma, like, you know, like when we say like, oh, karma will handle that. Not that I say that, but that is like a common kind of expression. I think that is what we mean, right? Like karma will just handle that. Yeah, but it's not like something is here to like punish us. Is that there's simply a lesson that we haven't learned, and we have to learn it so that we can come to the understanding that we are one thing, and that is the creation of it all. So, right speech, not, abstaining from divisive speech. There's a part in, the way that this key point or this guideline is explained where I personally resist a little bit, because there's the invitation to avoid conflict under this key point, which is, again, abstaining from divisive speech. And I personally feel that conflict is not intrinsically wrong. It's how we approach conflict that makes a difference, right? Because, friction in so many different ways of existence is here to allow things to grow, right? Like I talk about this all the time when I teach meditation and mindfulness. The way that we are training our attention in mindfulness is with distractions, because it's kind of like a muscle, right? The more our attention goes away and the more mindful I am and aware of that, and then I bring it back to this present moment, that is kind of like a muscle. It's like we're doing like some bicep curls. That is friction in a way. And in communication, I translate that to conflict, right? So how I approach that conflict is going to make a big difference. So I just wanted to make that little disclaimer there, that I personally think that conflict is not bad as long as we are keeping these guidelines of right speech and being impeccable with our word, which I will get there. This is probably going to be like a 2-hour thing. Oh my goodness. I'm going to try to be quicker. Because the essence of that conversation in which there is conflict involved is going to really change if we are coming from a place of love and compassion instead of trying to be divisive and trying to be harmful. So as long as the intention is pure and wholesome, conflict can actually lead to deeper connection, to deeper understanding. So that is one disclaimer that I wanted to make from abstaining from divisive speech. And the invitation here is to promote harmony and understanding with our speech, which is kind of like what I was talking about when we approach conflict. So the other one is abstaining from harsh or abusive language, which, again, it's kind of like self-explanatory. I love, honestly, that I'm kind of like talking about this because it really puts things in perspective of the way that we are approaching things in our mainstream kind of like way of living, right? Going on social media, going to even articles like magazines. I've always been so surprised with magazines that are still like out there and they still live, which are all about just harmful fake news. I find that like it's almost like fascinating at this point that exists. If you are curious, my painting is going really, really bad. Really bad. Definitely a good experiment to have, because maybe painting is not the right thing to do this. I have many more things that are hands-on that I could be doing. Painting doesn't seem to be a good one for this because it's not good at all. I mean, also I'm not good at this. Not that I'm not good, but like it's challenging. Like I have to like try a lot of times to get to a place where like, oh, that shadow looks kind of okay. That highlight looks kind of okay. This is not going well. Okay, so the last thing that I want to say about right speech from, again, the Buddhist perspective is abstaining from idle chatter and gossip, which again, it's like this teachings. I mean, the human experience and humans in general, like I think, the Buddha laid down these teachings 2,500 years ago, maybe more at this point. And, the human experience hasn't really changed. The way that we live has changed, but intrinsically, we are kind of like, it's the same biology, the same physiology. So the psychology is probably very, very similar, with different influences, external influences. But it's almost like, oh yeah, these teachings were for this time mainly, or they're really applicable for this time. I'm sure in any stage of human history, they are and they were. But right now, it's like, wow. Yeah, so avoid meaningless and trivial talk. Conversations should have purpose and value. Avoid engaging in harmful rumors. And, my grandma is someone that I've always really admired. My dad's mom. And one of the reasons why I admire her so much is because she's always so equanimous. She's always so neutral with all of the outside forces and influences. Like, I grew up in Colombia. Latin culture is known to be a little bit more on that realm of like, it's like novellas exist for a reason, right? And like the drama in novellas and all of that, are really telling of some of the ways and the dynamics of our culture, Latin culture. So one of the reasons why I've always really admired her is because she has always been someone that no matter what story she is hearing, someone is telling her, she remains very neutral, extremely neutral. There's nothing that she would say back or to engage in that, harmful gossip type of speech. Just always kind of like respecting everyone that is being addressed or that is in the story that is being told. And I think that ever since I noticed that as an adult, I've really tried to cultivate that in my life. Stand-up comedy has always been a challenge for me. It's really hard for me to engage with it because it feels like this, right? It feels like I'm making fun of at the expense of someone. And I've learned to relax a little bit and be more flexible to the point that I've gone to shows with my husband because he really enjoys that. Because, I've also learned that transmuting some of those wounds that we have culturally in this day and age kind of like requires other techniques, which in some way humor could be a way. But I always go back and forth. I always try to find a middle in between that, feeling really bad at hearing a joke that really felt wrong in my gut and, oh, am I being too rigid? And, all of this. So, not shaming anyone that likes it or anything like that. I laugh at many jokes, but I definitely find it very challenging to kind of like be a witness or, an spectator of that type of content. Yeah. So idle chatter and gossip, one of the things that I've just putting it into like more of a practical thing, whenever I'm around someone that will use their time and energy to talk to me about someone else in a harmful way, it makes me feel that person is going to do it when I'm not there, right? Why would they not? Because what they're showing me is that when there's not someone in the room, they feel safe to speak about them. And I mean, I've done it. I'm not saying that I never do it. Like, it's just a good thing, a good reminder to have there, that if we're talking about someone that is not in the room, even if we're talking good things about them, it's probably better not to, because in any given moment, that conversation can go the other way. And, all of these guidelines, all of these key points are here to be, again, reminders. They're not rules. It's just good to have these reminders and to have kind of like a compass that can tell us when we have gone astray or whatnot, Okay, so that is kind of like the summary of what right speech is about and why I love it. All really, really great reminders for me, and hopefully for you as well. Then, I mentioned this before, that I wanted to talk about the concept of being impeccable with our word, from Don Miguel Ruiz, which, he has explained some of the Toltec traditions through his books, specifically the Four Agreements in this one. And he mainly speaks, so it's being impeccable with our word is the first of the Four Agreements. So it's telling us that it's very, very important. So the first thing that he talks about is speaking with integrity, honesty, and truth. So our word for him is powerful, and we can create a reality with our word. And I've pretty much talked about storytelling. Again, in my last video, I talked about storytelling, and I've talked about it a few times, how it is so important, right? As humans, storytelling is huge. Language is huge. Communicating verbally is really what is a distinction from any other animal species, right? So the fact that we are capable of using our words to create connection, which ultimately creates reality, I almost see it as like a Lego, right? When we connect with something, we're building something. And how we connect is it's going to hold the integrity of that building, right? So he's talking about integrity. And I definitely see that, and I can see it visually, how this connections, how the communication that we hold, that we sustain, is such a big part of how we connect and how we create reality. In fact, I also wrote a little thing that, in the spiritual world, in like kind of like the mystical, esoterical, if you may, you would hear about this idea of spelling being related to spells, like magic spells. And it comes from, the etymology of the word spell. In Old English referred to speech, narrative, or story. And of course, we still use spell to describe the way in which we put together a word, right? So again, this goes back to my visualization of like, we're putting together kind of like these pieces that are building a foundation for something. In this case, words. In this case, a phrase or whatnot. So the fact that the etymology of spell in Old English referred to speech and narrative, and of course we still use it in that way, and in putting together a word. Spell also means a magical incantation. So this, of course, gives way to this idea that words themselves have a kind of magic or energetic power, which, without going into the magical and, if that's not kind of like your thing, of of course, we are using words to connect. We are using words to create the world, right? One of the first things that you do when you create a website, I don't know why this is coming to me, maybe because I'm creating a website soon for a product, but it's putting together the copy, right? The text that is going to go there. And I think the reason is because it is the foundation of the essence of that thing that we're creating. Because again, we are a species that mainly communicates through words. Of course, there's one of the dogs is really snoring loud, so I don't know if you can hear that. So of course, it's such a huge, important aspect of connecting, of the way that we build our reality. So Don Miguel Ruiz also talks about avoiding speaking against ourselves and others. I really, really love the fact that Don Miguel Ruiz really makes an emphasis on being impeccable with our word and using that impeccability towards ourselves. Use word impeccably towards yourself. Like, don't be negative. Don't speak critically towards yourself or to yourself, which I think is really important. This, again, avoid speaking against yourself or others, includes self-criticism and, again, gossip, which, I talked about from the Buddhist perspective. Then harness the power of your word. This goes back to the idea that our word is so powerful and we can create with every single word that we use. Don't use your word to spread harm. Very self-explanatory. I think this goes again with the teachings from Buddhism. And then the last one is be clear and intentional with communication. And, before I make this any longer, and my painting, if you're curious, did not go well. I'm definitely not going to be using this one again. I do like the fact that I still feel like I'm kind of like using my attention somewhere else, that I am speaking very fluidly. Usually I have to edit this a lot more. I don't think this is going to be the case with this video. But my chair looks awful. So I'll probably gonna spend some time after I stop talking, and then I'm gonna try to fix this. Maybe I'll keep recording here so you can see, or maybe I'll add a picture. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it's just there's no return. But I wanted to say a couple things. One of the things about harnessing the power of our word, which I love, is, this reminder that anything that we say is or has the capacity or the ability or the magic spell to create that thing. So if I constantly say to myself that I'm an idiot, I struggle a lot with some of the ways in which we use memes now, for example, is to kind of identify with some type of, whether that is ADHD or, I am whatever, messy. All of those things could have a degree of truth. But the moment that we start to repeat that to ourselves, oh yeah, I am, distracted. I have this and that. And constantly repeating to ourselves that, there's so much power in that, I believe. And, this is one of the reasons why I love one of the practices, or the practice in general, of mindfulness meditation, which is, getting familiar with our thoughts, because ultimately our thoughts are those words that perhaps we adopted, that we heard, or that we even created internally, and we keep repeating them. And yes, maybe we're not constantly saying them out loud, but the fact that we're holding them energetically in our, mind, that has power as well. So getting familiar with I talk about this a lot, our tendencies. What is it that we're always talking about? What is it that we're saying? It's so important because our word has so much power. So the more we use our words, our energy, our speech to talk about things that are aspirations or affirmations, right? Like I know I personally have struggled a lot with like affirmations. Sometimes they just don't feel right. So I lean more towards aspirations, right? So aspirational phrases are more, they're like something that I learned from mindfulness and from Buddhism. And basically to make a distinction here, aspirations come from a place of understanding that that is not necessarily what I have in this present moment, but I aspire towards that, right? So, you know, a lot of affirmations, like to say an example, like I am loved, right? If that is something that is not resonating with me at this second, like right now, like that feels like BS, I could say I may be loved, or I don't think that was a good example. I have the capacity to be loved. It's basically looking for a way in which we can acknowledge that that is not exactly how we feel at the moment, but we aspire towards that. I'll probably put together better examples of that for the future. And then lastly, be clear and intentional with communication. I mentioned that before, but I wanted to say something about that. So something is coming to mind. So the other day I was at the Y. I usually go to the Y and like I meditate under this tree that is there. But this tree is right behind the soccer field, and it's the soccer goal. How do you call that? You know what I'm talking about? Hopefully you do, because I don't know the name. And there's a trainer that is always there, but that day he was there, and I can't remember if this was before my meditation or even during my meditation. He came to where I was and he said, "Hey, I'm sorry, you know, to interrupt you, but I just wanted to let you know that the person that I'm training, he's very, you know, powerful, and he kicks really hard the soccer ball. So I don't want you to get, you know, hurt." And I was like, "Oh my God, thank you so much for letting me know. I'll move towards another area." And then the other day I went and I'm behind the tree. So like usually I am still behind a big tree. So like I'm kind of safe, but yes, I still have some chances to get hit if there's a lot of action going on. So there's another person, not the same trainer. This person is playing with the ball, and like they were doing multiple things, not just kicking the ball towards the arch. I don't know. And he didn't say anything, but I could feel the anger, right? I could feel that maybe he was frustrated because I was there. And I thought to myself when I left, because this is something that I thought about like towards the end of me being there, because I was meditating, my eyes were closed. I couldn't really like see what was happening. But I thought about, you know, the ability that we have to communicate, right? And so many times we're afraid to say things because we don't want to inconvenience someone. But then when we think about it, like it took 20 seconds for the trainer to come to me and say, "Hey, I don't want you to get hurt. I think it would be better if you move a little bit." And I was so thankful. And that person probably like said that, and it was out of his mind and his awareness, and we each moved on. And I'm not saying that the other person was angry and thought about me the whole day. No, but I thought about that possible scenario, right? Which takes me to why I'm saying it here, because I've experienced things like that in which I want to say something and then I didn't. And it was going to take some courage for me to say it, something like that person did, right? Like just come up close to someone and say like, "Hey, whatever." That is clear communication. I think that is that is an example of like why I thought about that, for clear communication and clear intentions. Because I think if we don't say things clearly, we may hold that the rest of the day, the rest of the week, the rest of the year. And then we kind of like flip the script And because it's something that is uncomfortable, we try to find someone to blame. And of course, if there's a clear person that we can blame for that anger, frustration, whatever, then we would. But in reality, if we think about that and we take responsibility for some of that interaction, maybe we could have been clear. Maybe we could have talked. Maybe we could have speak our hearts and our minds and ask for something that it was even to begin with the best for both or everyone involved, right? I think that again goes back to, it's important that the intention is always wholesome and it's not to harm the other person or just to be selfish towards, being selfish in a situation and just like thinking about ourselves. So like we need another person to move out of our way or something like that. Like, of course, we have to think about everyone involved. Again, this goes towards the situations that I've been in before where maybe I'm not clear about an interaction. If I had asked someone, like sometimes, I don't know, you think someone is upset at you and we're kind of afraid to ask. And I think that, especially if we have a relationship in which, that relationship is deserving or is a relationship that we care for, I think part of our responsibility is reaching out to someone and saying like, hey, is there anything wrong? Or, I have been feeling like X, can we talk about this or whatnot? And those things take a lot of courage. I understand that. I understand this is why it's one of the trickiest of all of this, discussion about being impeccable with our word and right speech. But I think ultimately the reason why, these teachings are important is because they're teaching us to grow, and they're teaching us to liberate ourselves again from suffering. And that, of course, involves others because we are all interconnected. So with that, we have a failed painting, but I enjoyed this setup and I enjoyed talking about this. So hopefully I can figure out how to navigate these two things and actually make it work. You may now find more of this type of things in videos and artsy things in this YouTube channel. So hopefully this was helpful somehow. And that's it. I will see you in the next video.